Alright, so in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about the biggest misconceptions that the media, people in the outside world, and even other YouTube review channels have when it comes to the Terrifier series. And I'm going to debunk these so that we can all see what Terrifier really is about. The truth of Terrifier, not all these outlier reasons that people give you as to why this franchise or set of movies is not worth your time. So, kicking it off, we're just going to start out right off the bat with poor acting is one of the biggest things that people complain about when it comes to the Terrifier franchise. And I will give in, that's why I made this one number one, on the very first Terrifier movie that the acting was kind of poor. But I also give it kind of its own little thing because this was a movie made on a $35,000 budget. I mean, Blair Witch Project in 1999 cost more money than this, I believe. And so did Paranormal Activity, which came out in 2009. So both those movies used found footage, which is the cheapest way to make a horror movie. And they cost more money than it did to make Terrifier 1. So, are you going to have some poor acting in there? Yes. He's an unknown director. His first actual movie. He had no money behind it. And the fact that he was able to do all of this stuff inside this movie, poor acting, it happens. But overall, the character of Art the Clown itself, the acting was great in that movie. And then when we moved on to Terrifier 2 and 3, we got a much better supporting cast, much better acting, and all across the board, it actually was a lot better, and it would be on par, if not better, than most horror movies that you've ever watched. 80s, 90s, 2000s. I mean, we're still getting movies to this day that have way worse acting than the Terrifier series. Alright, that's one. Misconception number two is that these movies are made as gore for gore's sake. So as my little ply for this one is why you can kind of say that is because Damien Leone is the writer, the director, and up until the third movie, the special effects artist, which is what he's known for, is special effects. So when he made the first movie, he said, well, I have no studio budget, I have no backing, how do I compete with a $2.5 million budget or a $20 million budget? I know special effects. I can do those and I can make them awesome, and I'm going to go to a new level of extreme when I shoot my movie. And that's going to be what puts us on the map. So, in the first one, it did kind of have that. However, when you make it through the movies themselves, you find out that the character of Art the Clown, in order for him to be brought back to life by this entity that we do not know of yet, is that they needed somebody who has very malicious intent, someone who is heinously angry, vile, and that's exactly what he portrays in the very first movie with all of his gore for gore's sake, as they say. So it actually does end up fitting the storyline in total for these movies. And then obviously it's going to continue going on forward because you have this vile character who's being brought back from the dead and controlled by an entity that is going to be straight from hell, so therefore that entity is going to be vile and evil as well. So of course it's going to get a little more intense and amped up because you go from regular version to now regular version controlled by demon, and voila, you have a lot of gore. Number 3. And this one is probably the most ridiculous one I've heard. I understand it with the first movie, but even after the second and the third have come out, I still hear people say, including YouTube movie reviewers, that there's no storyline in the Terrifier movies. There's no direction and it makes no sense. And this would be the exact opposite of that. This whole series of movies, all three of them combined, including a fourth one coming out soon, are kind of all like an episodic journey that you're going on, where you only get so much in this movie. Then we get the next movie, which creates new lore for this universe that also helps explain the first one, but will also move into the third one. And then the third one also brings in new lore, and then it adds some stuff and it helps explain things in the second one, while leaving some things open so that you go into the fourth one. Meaning that if you want to understand this entire world that we're in when it comes to Terrifier, is that you have to watch each and every movie because they're not standalone movies. They can be, but each one has its own part of the lore that kind of adds to the first one, the second one, the third one, to the next one. So, no storyline is a load of crap. The first one, yes, we watched Art the Clown just kill, kill, kill. And then all of a sudden he came back from the dead and nobody knew what was going on because nothing was explained. And then, boom, part 2 comes out and then you find out that there's this demonic entity that is maybe somehow surrounding itself around Art the Clown, but maybe he's still supernatural, but you don't quite really know what's going on. But now there's this whole character of Sienna, and it becomes like a good versus evil type storyline and what's going on with that. Boom, you move over to the third one. And now we got some new elements in there that pretty much is saying how there's this demon that brought back Art from the dead. And now he's doing the bidding for this demon. But this demon knows he didn't quite figure it all out in part 2. So in part 3, the demon's going to be alongside him in a vessel of somebody that he harmed in the past. And now they're going to be going up against it because Sienna, who we thought was just good versus evil, we find out is actually the one chosen by the gods to defeat this evil. And it becomes a whole good versus evil, but kind of almost like a biblical story in a sense, because you have angels and you have demons and all this stuff, and it ends up we're probably going to be going into the portals of hell. So as you can see, like this storyline, it just builds and builds and builds into this whole world of stuff where we're going to be leading into new worlds and new storylines. So no storyline, load of crap. Alright, so number 4 of what the biggest complaint is, which this is the one we got to see with part 3, and there was a lot of groups and activists that came out and said that kids are not supposed to be killed in film. Terrifier 3, boycott the movie because all these kids die in the movie. How this was the movie that took the hit for kids dying, no sense. Absolutely none. It is probably the dumbest thing I've heard. When literally, we just had a remake, 2 chapters of It, the highest grossing horror movie of all time, kills kids. Georgie, right in the beginning. Such an epic scene. Even cartoons and everything else were remaking it. Art the Clown kills somebody? Terrible. Pennywise the Clown? Masterpiece. Alright, so that's one movie. How about, I think it was 2 years ago, When Evil Lurks. Everybody remember the kids who died in that movie? Because Art the Clown's killings were kind of off screen where we saw an aftermath. When Evil Lurks, we watch a giant dog literally take down a little girl, mauling her and dragging her around by her head. And then we see a mom carrying her child while scooping the brains out with his hand and eating them. But Terrifier 3 went too far. Think about that. When Evil Lurks was given all these awards, but people came after Terrifier 3. Now, my last one that's going to be on this list is going to be a movie that came out last year when Terrifier 3 came out, just shortly after, and yet everybody was praising it and saying it deserved all these awards. And that's Nosferatu. We watched 2 kids die in Nosferatu. But nobody blinks or says a word. Why? Why is Terrifier 3 the poster child of how can you kill kids when all these other movies do it? And those are just 3 recent movies that did it. We've watched movies for a very, very long time. I mean, the It miniseries in 1990 killed kids. And then, that's just killing kids. Let's not talk about the countless different church-based movies when a lot of the church organizations said that this movie should be banished because of what it does to kids, that show kids getting possessed by demons. Like The Exorcist. 1970s. That's a whole movie about a small child. I mean, she's probably like 11, 12, 13. But still, getting possessed by a demon and doing some ungodly acts still praises the greatest horror movie of all time. Terrifier 3 shows the aftermath of what Art the Clown did to some kids. Boycott it. Load of crap. And the last thing I want to touch base on, I wasn't sure if I wanted to or not, but it kind of came up recently in like the last week. And that was, there was some tweets and some comments that were made by both David Howard Thornton and Damien, and it kind of brought on a new life. And I just think these comments were kind of misconstrued. The biggest one for me would be for Damien Leone. There was a whole thing of kind of like the LGBTQ community was brought into this, and some were saying that movies are meant to be supported by that group, and if they're not, then they're meant to be against that group. I'm not entirely sure what was going on with the whole situation, but I do know that Damien Leone had a comment, and he took extreme backlash for it, which was kind of like him towing the line. But it actually made sense if you ask me, because if you listen to movie reviewers, YouTube, critics, everywhere, a lot of them always complain when there is a political agenda forced into a movie. People complain about that all the time. I know Black Christmas, I think it was 2019, was the girl power, and it was forced down your throat. And I watched review after review after review of people hating that movie. How about the decisive movie, The Hunt? Well, this is for liberals. No, this is for the other side here. That movie was divided completely in half, all based on political feelings. All Damien said was that his movies are not made for this specific group or any specific group, and they're not made against any specific group. He just likes to make good movies that are entertaining fun with no political agenda that anybody can watch. I don't really know why he got all this backlash from even the LGBTQ community. It made no sense. I mean, I know he wasn't really picking a side of like, should this be allowed, should this not be allowed type of thing, but in the end he was just trying to say like his movies are not made with any agenda. They are just made to be entertainment that anybody can go watch if they want to. Which, no offense, but it makes sense. He wants to make movies that are for everyone, not one that's going to be decisive and piss people off. His movies already have enough controversy in them. I mean, you have killings that are extremely gory. You have scenes where it seems like he was only doing gory deaths to women, and then he kind of corrected that in the third one, and he gave an extremely gory death to a man. I mean, he had scenes in the third one, not just kids dying, but you had self-mutilation in there, which is a huge trigger for people. You had the guy hung up like Jesus with his head cut off, and you had the thorn crown on Sienna's head. Like, for people that are doing religion, that is kind of a huge trigger. So you had the kids, you had the self-harm, mutilation, you had that. There was like a suicidal type scene, and I know there was another thing, it's drawn a blank from my mind, but that like these are very controversial things that are in his movie. So for people to attack him for not taking a political side, but yet he still brings this other stuff in that's not really a political side, but it still does bring like a conversation and controversy to a movie. I just thought that was like kind of ironic that people wanted to call him out for that. Now, maybe I misrepresenting what was said in a sense. If I did, you can let me know in the comments. But that was my take on it. Was he was just trying to say like these Terrifier movies, they're not made for a group, they're not made against a group, they're not in pro, con, none of that stuff. These are just good, wholesome entertainment made for you, the fans. Alright, if you want to know more about Art the Clown and the Terrifier and the demon that controls him, check out this video right here. It's going to be a good one.